All right, people, presidential election 2024 is right around the corner, and Kamala Harris is in trouble. Her problem is that she is not receiving the same level of support from the black community that Barack Obama received. Barack Obama got 97% of the black vote the first time he ran and 94% the second time he ran. There are estimates of about Kamala's level of support ranges anywhere from 60 to 80%, and that could very well cost her the election. So in an attempt to garner some support for her, Barack came out a couple of weeks ago, and he basically laid the blame at the foot of black men, saying that black men don't want to support her because she's a woman, and he was widely criticized for that. But there is an element of truth to what he was saying, because if you saw the interview with Lord Jamar on the Art of Dialogue, basically in so many words, he said, yeah, women are not equipped to handle the responsibilities and pressures of, being the president. And that is exactly what Obama was talking about. But that represents a small, very, very small percentage of her problems, in my opinion. She's got a lot bigger issues, a lot bigger challenges for her candidacy. And so let's chop it up, get into it. So her first problem is that her identity politics are completely screwed up. So Kamala's mother, we know, is a traditional Indian woman from India, Hindu woman that came to this country in 1958, and Kamala was born in 1964. Her father is Jamaican, and Kamala, for years, has identified as Indian, which makes sense because she was raised by her mother. Her mother and father divorced when she was 5 years old. And from the time that she was 8 years old to 19, she lived in Canada. So she wasn't even in the United States. She has no American ancestry at all. And so basically it's just a technicality that she's even considered American. She just happened to be born in this country, but wasn't raised here. So like I said, for years, Kamala has identified herself as Indian. We have the clip of her on the Indian cooking show, where the host asked her, you are Indian? And she said very enthusiastically, yes, yes, yes. Okay, run the clip.
So what we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because you are Indian.
Yes.
Okay,
Indian.
and I don't know that everybody knows that.
It's amazing how many people did not know she was of Indian origin.
I am so proud. You're an Indian, Kamala. Yeah.
People do say that all the time. They're like, did you know? And I'm like, yeah.
And so were you raised eating South Indian food?
South Indian food, dal, lots of dal.
Yes.
Then we have the clip after her and Biden had won the election, and she comes out and has a message for Indians, proudly proclaiming herself as the first South Indian Vice President of the United States. Okay, run the clip.
And this campaign with Indian Americans at senior levels, which of course includes the top of the heap, our dear friend, who will be the first Indian American Vice President in the history of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
To the people of India and to Indian Americans all across the United States, I want to wish you a happy Indian Independence Day. On August 15th, 1947, men and women all over India rejoiced in the declaration of the independence of the country of India. Today, on August 15th, 2020, I stand before you as the first candidate for Vice President of the United States of South Asian descent.
Now, it's strange that you have never heard her identify herself as black, despite the fact that she claims her mother raised her and her sister to be proud black girls. And that's hard to believe, but we'll deal with that in a second. So in her book, The Truths That We Hold, she says that her mother raised her and her sister to be proud black girls. Then there was an article that came out about 3 months ago, and where she said the same thing in this article, that her mother raised her and her sister to be proud black girls. Then during the debate with Trump, she declined to deal with the question of identity at all. CNN interview, she did the same thing, refused to deal with the question at all when it was brought up. And then when she was on the All the Smoke podcast with Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, when they brought up the question of identity, she again repeated the same thing. My mother raised me and my sister to be proud black girls. I mean, who identifies like that? That's a very bizarre way to identify yourself. If someone asks me, Kevin, what religion are you? And I say, oh, my mother raised me and my brother to be Catholics. Okay, that's nice, but you didn't answer the question. We didn't ask you what your mother raised you to be. We asked you, what are you? and I mean, today I could be Muslim, right? So to say that, oh yeah, my mother raised me and brother to be proud, it's just bizarre. If someone says that once, it's odd, you kind of let it go. But she said it now 4 different occasions that I know of this year. And it's almost like she wants, it's so weird, it's almost like she wants plausible denial. Imagine a world where she's brought into court and she has to identify, and the judge accuses her of perpetrating as a black woman, and then she says, Your Honor, I never once said I was a black. And she would be right, because she has never said it. All she said is this thing about how her mother raised her. Now, this whole thing about her traditional Indian mother raising her and her sister to be proud black girls, I'm going to call a BS on that. Don't believe it. It's far-fetched. If anything, her mother would have raised them to be proud Indian girls. And if she wanted to raise them to be proud black girls, she would have been unqualified to do that. So for example, my wife is Dominican. Well, I mean, she's American, but her mother and father from the Dominican Republic, and all her ancestors going back to slavery days are from the Dominican Republic. So if we had divorced when my oldest was 5, that would have left me. So what I was saying is that if me and my wife had divorced when my oldest was 5, the way Kamala, mother and father, divorced when she was 5, that would have left me with a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And even if I wanted to raise them to be proud Dominicans, I would have been grossly unqualified to do that, in the same way that Kamala's mother would have been grossly unqualified to raise her to be a proud black girl, as she claims. And those of you that have Indian friends that are familiar with the culture, I'm not going to say anything disparaging about it, but those of you that know, you know that is just preposterous and absolutely outrageous that her mother would have raised her to be anything but a proud Indian girl. So when she goes on All the Smoke podcast with Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, they ask her who her favorite rapper is. And she literally could not answer the question. So you claim to be black, the #1 selling musical genre in the country, and you can't even name your favorite rapper? So then they throw 2 names at her, Tupac and Jay-Z. And then she says, oh, yeah, Tupac. Yeah, we used to listen to him, when we were in the dormitory. Well, Tupac would have been like 11 or 12 years old. So we know that didn't happen. So let's cut to the chase. Why is this important? It's important because it's become an issue in her campaign. And number 2, she's missed an opportunity for a progressive moment, and an opportunity to move the nation forward. We don't care how she identifies, racially. We could care less. We all know what her status would have been back in slavery days, okay? And despite the nonsense that Judge Joe Brown is saying about her father, by the standards of this society, yeah, her father was black. So she could have said something like this. I consider myself to be multiracial and multicultural in the same way that the United States of America is multiracial and multicultural. And I see that as one of the strengths of our nation. And hopefully, once I'm in office, I can make a contribution to lifting the thinking of Americans everywhere, so that the next time a candidate comes along that looks like me, she won't have to answer questions about race, questions which are based on pseudoscience, fake science, are ultimately unimportant and have nothing to do with what my leadership represents. But of course she wouldn't say anything like that, because number 1, she's not progressive. And number 2, according to her, America is not a racist country. Not only did she say America is not a racist country, she said America is not inherently racist. So when you throw that word inherently in there, now we have to go and look into the inner workings of the country, and we have to go back into the history of the country. I mean, I was born during the era of legalized segregation. She's 4 years younger than me. She was born the same year the Civil Rights Act was passed. What do you mean America is not inherently a racist country? This is absurd statement. It's offensive and it's reprehensible. The truth is that every black person in America, without exception, will face discrimination upon interfacing with white society. Let me repeat that. Every black person in the United States of America will face discrimination upon interfacing with white society. But she's going to stand up here and say America is not racist, which means when she gets into office, she's not going to make a contribution to uplifting the thinking of American. She's not going to make a contribution to making racism unpopular. She's not going to make a contribution to the destruction of racism in America. And that's a shame. So let's talk about her anti-American, anti-constitutional position on gun control. As when she was working in San Francisco as a district attorney, she supported something called Prop H, where she wanted to ban all handguns in San Francisco. So the sale of handguns, the ownership of handguns, distribution of handguns would be illegal, right? Clear violation of the Second Amendment, which states that the security of a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. So not only did she want to infringe on your right to bear arms in San Francisco, outlawing all handguns, she went so far as to say, even though the guns are locked up in your house, we have the right to come in, bust into your house, and make sure you have your guns secured in a safe way. So clear violation of the Fourth Amendment now. So run a clip.
And just because you legally possess a gun in the sanctity of your locked home doesn't mean that we're not going to walk into that home and check to see if you're being responsible and safe in the way you conduct your affairs.
Let's hear that again. Just because you legally possess a gun in the sanctity of your locked home doesn't mean that we're not going to walk into that home and check to see if you're being responsible and safe. This is so disturbing. I mean, these Democratic plantation workers accuse Republicans of being right-wing. I mean, this is extreme right-wing. It's tyrannical. This is Nazi Germany. She admits that your gun is in the sanctity of your own home, but she has no problem with violating the sanctity of your home to come in and check under the pretense that you're checking. The government is going to check to see that we're keeping our guns safely. I can't believe that she would come out and say something like this publicly and think that this is okay for America. I mean, this is just beyond. It's outrageous. I mean, this just shows how twisted, demented, and un-American her thinking is. Clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. The Supreme Court case Florida versus Jardines, the Supreme Court justices said, when it comes to the Fourth Amendment, the home is first among equals. At the amendment's core stands the right of a man to retreat into his home and there be free from unreasonable governmental intrusion. So if you think that this is a reasonable governmental intrusion, by all means relocate to North Korea, please, and take Kamala Harris with you. So I don't know anyone that is pro-gun violence. So let's look at this for a second, because first she was trying to go after all the handguns, and now she's going after assault weapons, which is a very vague term. And what firearm is not an assault weapon? What firearm is not an assault weapon? So you have her defenders saying, they mean automatic weapons. No, they don't mean automatic weapons, because automatic weapons has been illegal in the United States since the 80s. So they don't mean that. They mean semi-automatic rifles. Look, that's nonsense. The bottom line is, wake up. They want to take all the guns from us. Okay, that's the bottom line. Now, I don't know anyone that is pro-gun violence, right? I've never met anyone that is pro-gun violence. So let's look at the facts and figures. Annually, there's about 13,000 gun deaths in the United States. And anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500, depending on the year, are the police gunning down citizens, 50% of which are unarmed. And when I say unarmed, I mean they didn't have guns. They might have had a knife or axe or whatever. But so 50% of those, I'm calling them unarmed. So that brings us down to 12,000. Out of that 12,000, a full 60% are suicides. I mean, this is shocking when I, uncovered this. A full 60% of gun deaths in the country are suicides. And that is suicides with handguns, by the way. So if you're truly interested in reducing gun violence in this country, wouldn't you go after the greatest number, which is suicides? So that means we have a mental health issue that has to be addressed. Out of the remaining 40%, a full 80 to 90% of those are homicides carried out with handguns. So it's not the AR-15, which they always like to cite. And she says, oh yeah, because these are weapons of war. So if they're weapons of war, why do the police have them? So who are the police going to wage war against? You said the weapons of war, AR-15s and those type of rifles are assault weapons. Why do the police have them? Listen, the purpose of the Second Amendment was written because they had just overthrown the British government, and they believed that there could come a time in the future when the people would have to rise up and overthrow the government again if the government started moving towards tyranny. It's a government that was created to serve the people, not for the people to serve the government. The government should be afraid of the people. The people should not be afraid of the government. So now you have a representative of government, the potential enemy, saying lay down your guns. Like, what? Okay, we'll lay down our guns. You do it first. You set an example for us. Because as Martin Luther King said back in the 60s, and is still true today, my own government is the largest purveyor of gun violence in the world today, the largest purveyor of gun sales in the world today, and you're telling us to lay down our guns. Okay, great. You set the example first. But if they have their way, which is disarming Americans so they can bring in whatever type of, repressive measures that they are concocting, the only people left in this country with firearms would be government troops, government forces, police, et cetera, and the criminal element of society. So how could that make any of us feel safe? Like, this is just, it's madness. So gun control. So here's the procedure to buy a gun in my state, in the state of Pennsylvania, where there's over 750,000 registered gun owners. So you research the gun that you want to buy. Then you go to your local gun store, and invariably they're not going to have the gun that you want. So you go and you order it online. And when you order it online and pay for it, they don't send the gun to your house. They send it to the local gun store that you specify, and then you go to the gun store once the gun arrives, and then you have to go through the application and background check information, which is a police background check. Okay, after you pass the police background check, then you can finally get the gun which you've already paid for. So when you hear these people talk, you would think that there's no background checks taking place. You cannot buy a gun legally anywhere in this country, not at a gun store, not at an auction, gun show, whatever, without the background check. So when they're talking about gun controls as if there's no background checks or whatever, I mean, it's madness. So a couple of years ago, I remember watching Kamala Harris, and she was talking about gun control, and she said, "Oh yeah, we have to do something about the guns, because our children are dying." And then she walked away from the reporter after saying that. So then this year, I was reading some statistics that said that gun violence is the number one cause of death, amongst children in the country, and I thought that was strange because I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, I had looked up the thing about children and death. And the number one cause was death at human hands and infectious diseases. So I look into the stats that they're putting out now, saying that, oh yeah, gun violence is the number one cause of death, of our children. And I found out they're including 18 and 19-year-olds. You can't make this up. That's purposely deceitful. Because what 18, 19-year-old is going to a pediatrician? What 18 or 19-year-old, if arrested, is going to go to a juvenile detention facility? Once you take that 18 and 19-year-old out, then gun violence is no longer the number one cause of death. And if including 18 and 19-year-olds wasn't sufficient to fit their narrative, then they would have included 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds until they're able to, justify the false narrative that they're projecting. It's terrible. So 13,000 annual gun deaths in the country. 45,000 deaths caused by automobile accidents every year. 45,000 versus 15,000. Why is there no outcry about the 45,000 automobile accidents? And why isn't the same energy and the same brainwashing taking place to do something about, reducing the number of vehicular homicides every year, right? 450 to 500,000 deaths every year due to heart attack and stroke. Okay, why aren't you putting pressure on these agencies that are out here doing fake research on heart disease, fake research on cancer? And when I say fake research, it's research that is not solution oriented, so that they can keep getting funded year after year after year. Okay, why just focusing on gun violence as if that's the biggest problem, of facing us in this country? So supposedly they're against gun violence, but they're not against sending billions of dollars to Israel every year to support the brutal savagery that's taking place in the Middle East. You claim to be against gun violence, but yet under the Biden-Harris administration, you've sent over $175 billion to the Ukraine to support the madness that's going on over there. A war where we, the American people, do not benefit at all. Yes, there's a handful of corporations, part of the military-industrial complex, that get filthy rich from supporting the conflict in the Ukraine. But we, the American people, do not benefit from this war in the Ukraine. We've got no business over there, and we should get out of there. The Ukraine and Russia border each other just like this, and just like we in the United States have something called the Monroe Doctrine, which means nothing is jumping off in this country, in this Western Hemisphere, without our approval, Russia probably has something similar. It's got nothing to do with us. That $175 billion could be much better used here on our citizens of the United States. If she was a progressive candidate, if she was a progressive American, such as myself, progressive Americans mean that we want to see America progress. She would have said something like this: war is an abomination, and we have to find a better way at this point in our evolution. And I believe that we can find a better way through the practice of beneficent capitalism instead of through predatory capitalism and imperialism, which is what we've supported and practiced for decades and decades. But again, she's not going to say that. So progressive Americans, every time there's a presidential election, we ask ourselves, who is the best candidate, the best person to lead this country? And because of that criteria, in my lifetime, I have voted Democratic, I have voted Republican, and I have voted third party, right, independents. If you have only voted Democratic your entire life, then you're a Democratic plantation worker with sworn blind allegiance to the Democratic Party, which means that if Biden had never stepped down from this election, you would have voted for Biden simply because he's on the Democratic ticket, knowing that the man is severely mentally compromised, and knowing that everyone in the world, every leader, world leader, knows that the man is severely compromised. So voting like that, to me, it's not in the best interest of America. And by the same token, if you have voted nothing but Republican your entire life, as if this is some type of a team sport, oh, I'm a Republican, and calling yourself a fake conservative, you're a fake conservative. And what you really mean is blind obedience to Republican authority. Because if you were really conservative, you would be against hydrofracking, which Kamala Harris clearly is not against. You would be against hydrofracking, which is something that involves destroying the mountainside and poisoning the drinking water of the neighboring towns. Okay, so why wouldn't you be against that? If you're a conservative, you'd want to conserve nature. You'd be against a lot of this offshore drilling that's taking place. You'd be against the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. So stop calling yourselves conservative. You're not. That's fake. You're fake conservatives. So lastly, I want to touch on this subject of abortion, because this is a big part of Kamala's campaign. She was running commercials early on, and all she ever talked about is abortions and improving the economy. But I don't like the language that she's using when she's talking about abortion. I find it to be duplicitous and intentionally misleading, because she calls abortion, she talks about, she calls it reproductive rights for women. Abortion has nothing to do with reproductive rights for women, because there's no restrictions on women in this country as far as reproduction goes. That would make sense for a woman who's living in China, because in China they actually have restrictions on the number of children that a family can have, and if you go beyond that number, there's penalties and consequences, right, for doing that. So women there, it makes sense for them to talk about reproductive rights. Here, it doesn't make any sense to talk about reproductive rights, and it's misleading because it's like she's trying to hide the fact that what she really means is destructive rights for women. That's what she's advocating for, right? Destructive rights for women. Now, abortion is not it's not an issue, not a factor in my personal life. My kids are all grown and adults and stuff, so I had to go ahead and do some research on this subject. So I started with Roe v. Wade, and this is the conditions or the laws, what was permitted under Roe v. Wade. So in the first semester, states people could have abortions, unrestricted for whatever reason, the first trimester. Second trimester, there were certain restrictions as long as they were related to the mother's health. And then the third trimester, abortions were outlawed unless there was some type of emergency situation, right? Some type of extenuating circumstance, such as, the mother's life, being threatened, something like that. So, I'm okay with this. I can accept that. I don't have a problem with that, because by the third semester that's when they're saying that that the fetus is viable. So it's no longer actually a fetus. At that point, it's a baby that could actually live outside its mother's womb. And so abortions during that period, you got to call it what it is. Got to call it what it is, and that's murder. Also, what I found out is that Roe v. Wade was it was kicked to the curb. It was overturned. So Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. And I was surprised when I came across that info. And, I questioned it and doubted it, because 2022, that was Biden and Harris were in office. And all along, I'm hearing that, oh, yeah, Trump, he overturned Roe v. Wade. He overturned Roe v. Wade. In 2022, he was out of office. So that's weird. It's just strange. Another, shocking, startling discovery there. And I was saying first semester, second semester. Obviously, I meant trimester. If I'm wrong on that, someone correct me. But yeah, that's what I found. 2022, which is crazy, because I always thought it was something. The way they make it seem, it was something that that Trump overturned when he was president. But apparently not. Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. So the way things are now, there's 13 states where abortion is completely illegal, right? And then there are a bunch of states where it's legal with the term limits in place, the term limits as specified by Roe v. Wade. And then you have 7 states that have no gestational limits at all on abortion. So a woman could have an abortion 7th, 8th, 9th month. New Jersey, I'll give them a special shout out, because I noticed that they were on that list, and it was pretty shocking, but I guess it shouldn't be, because all the communist states such as New York, New Jersey, California, and I guess we can expect this nonsense. Like, you're going to allow a woman to have an abortion 7th, 8th, 9th month, no extenuating circumstances, no threat to the mother's life. No way in hell. We can't allow that. She's talking about running around talking about gun control all the time, trying to make that unpopular. Why don't you make third trimester abortions, unpopular, and stop calling it reproductive rights? It's ridiculous. And you're trying to insult people's intelligence. So lastly, her immigration policy has been disastrous. How is this good for America? It clearly is not. But you have to understand their twisted thinking. Their twisted thinking is by letting in all these millions and millions of illegals come in. At one point, they will be beholden to the Democratic Party. And once they get legalized. They'll be voting Democratic for the rest of their life, and this will be a great boon for the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, like I said, they're giving no consideration to how is this good for America. How is it good to bust these a bunch of bust them into New York, and then give $36 million so they have debit cards for their living expenses, and not look to deport what is essentially criminal behavior. And then, sex change operations for prisoners. I mean, this is madness. This is sheer, utter madness. You're talking about procedures that are not a medical necessity, cosmetic. So you're going to give a sex change operation. I guess you're going to include with that a BBL. Of course, you're going to include breast augmentation and what else? Facial plastic surgery if they want that also. I mean, this is madness. This woman is insane. But I shouldn't really call her insane because I know she's just doing the bidding of her handlers, the people behind her that are really pulling the strings. So this is the kind of America you want. Hey, go ahead and vote for her. And if you are going to vote for her, what is your defense of Kamala Harris? What is your defense? I'm out.